Nobody cares what you did, my son texted me. Funny, because the second I walked into the grand ballroom at the National Veterans Honor Ceremony in Washington, D.C., more than 300 veterans rose to their feet. No one spoke. No one applauded. They simply stood. Then, one by one, they raised their hands in salute. The room went so quiet I could hear the air conditioning humming above the chandeliers. A retired four-star general crossed the room toward me. He didn't offer a handshake. He stopped 3 feet away, straightened his back, and saluted. "Welcome home, Colonel." Only then did I glance toward the VIP section. My son Ethan had gone completely pale. His mouth opened, but no words came out. Finally, barely above a whisper, he asked the question he never imagined he'd have to ask his own father. "Dad, who are you?" 3 weeks earlier, none of this had happened yet. "My name is Frank Donovan. I'm 68, widowed, retired. Most people in my town of Springfield, Ohio, know me as the quiet old mechanic who waves at the mail carrier and never misses Sunday service. Every morning starts the same way. Coffee, the local paper, feeding the birds in the backyard. Then a couple of hours fixing lawnmowers or helping a neighbor with an old pickup. I don't charge much. Sometimes I don't charge anything at all. It's a peaceful life, exactly the kind of life my wife Margaret wanted for us. She passed 6 years ago, after a long fight with breast cancer. Losing her was harder than anything I had ever been through, and that's saying something. People assume old soldiers spend their retirement talking about the past. I never did. The only reminders of my military career sat locked inside a cedar chest in my bedroom closet: uniform, medals, photographs, letters. Things I hadn't touched in years. I preferred it that way. Unfortunately, my son didn't share that preference. Or maybe it's more honest to say he never cared enough to ask. Ethan was 39, successful and proud of it. He owned a growing cybersecurity company in Columbus. Nice house, a luxury SUV, a country club membership. Every photo on his social media looked like it belonged in a magazine. I was proud of what he'd built. I just wished he measured success by something more than money. That Wednesday afternoon, my phone buzzed. "Dinner at our place Saturday," Ethan wrote. "Allison wants everyone together." There was no please. There never was. Still, I replied that I'd be there. A minute later, another message arrived. "Try not to tell those old army stories again. Nobody relates to them." I stared at the screen for a long moment, then slid the phone back into my pocket. Margaret used to tell me, "Frank, people only use words as weapons when they think they're winning." She was usually right. Saturday evening, I drove my 12-year-old Ford pickup into Ethan's neighborhood. Every house looked twice as expensive as mine: fresh landscaping, stone entrances, lawns cut like carpet. I parked between 2 luxury vehicles that probably cost more than my entire retirement savings combined. My 10-year-old grandson, Liam, threw open the front door before his father could even reach it. "Grandpa." He wrapped his arms around me, and that hug alone made the whole drive worth it. "Hey, buddy," I said. "You want to see my baseball cards?" "I'd love to." Before we could get upstairs, Ethan appeared holding 2 glasses of wine. "Dad." "Ethan." His handshake felt more like closing a business deal than greeting his father. Inside, guests were already gathered around the kitchen island: business partners, neighbors, friends from the club, every wrist wearing an expensive watch. One man asked what I used to do for work. "I'm retired now," I told him. "But before that, I served in the army." "Oh," he said, nodding politely before turning right back to Ethan. Conversation over. That part didn't bother me. What happened next did. One of Ethan's friends laughed, pointing at a news segment about military spending playing on the television. "Frank's probably got some stories from back in the day." Before I could answer, Ethan chuckled first. "My dad always acts like the military was some huge adventure." The room laughed along with him. I think he spent more time polishing boots than changing history, he added, and the laughter grew louder. I smiled politely. I mostly just did my job. Exactly, Ethan said, lifting his wine glass. See, nothing exciting. Nobody noticed Liam, quietly glancing back and forth between his father and me, trying to understand why the room was laughing at his grandfather. Children notice far more than adults ever give them credit for. Dinner moved to the dining room, where the conversation orbited investments, vacation homes, promotions. Every time I tried asking someone about their own family, the topic drifted right back to business. Toward the end of dessert, Liam asked, innocently, "Grandpa, did you ever get any medals?" The table went quiet. Before I could answer, Ethan sighed. "Liam, medals aren't really that important." "They're not?" "No," he said, glancing at me. "Besides, Grandpa would have told us if he'd done anything extraordinary." I only nodded. "Your dad's right about one thing," I said. "What's that?" "Medals aren't the most important thing." "So what is?" "The people you bring home with you." Margaret used to say that too. The conversation moved on, but I noticed Liam sitting with my answer a while longer than the rest of the room did. As I got ready to leave, Allison walked me out to the porch. "I'm sorry," she said. "You don't have anything to apologize for." "He doesn't mean to sound disrespectful." "I know." She hesitated. "I wish he'd ask about your life." "So do I." Driving home that night, I wasn't angry. Just disappointed. Not because Ethan underestimated me, because somewhere along the way, he'd stopped being curious about the people who loved him. 3 days later, an official envelope arrived in my mailbox. The return address read Department of Veterans Affairs. Inside was a cream-colored invitation. I unfolded it carefully. "Colonel Franklin James Donovan, in recognition of your extraordinary service and lifelong commitment to your fellow veterans, you are invited to receive the National Legacy of Service Award during this year's National Veterans Honor Ceremony in Washington, D.C. I read it twice, then a third time. At the bottom, a handwritten note. "Sir, many of the men you led insisted this happen while they still had the chance to thank you in person." For several minutes, I just sat there in my kitchen. The coffee had gone cold. Outside, birds landed near the feeder Margaret had painted years earlier. "You'd hate all this attention," I whispered to the empty chair across the table. In my heart, I could almost hear her laugh back. "Then don't make it about you, Frank." She always knew exactly what to say. I carried the invitation upstairs and, for the first time in years, opened the cedar chest. The smell of old cedar filled the room. My dress uniform lay exactly where Margaret had placed it after my retirement ceremony. Beneath it, photographs I hadn't looked at in decades, young faces, bright smiles. Some of those men became lifelong friends. Some never made it home. I ran my fingers gently across the ribbons above the left pocket. Not because I missed wearing them. Because each one reminded me of somebody else. Somebody who deserved to be remembered. As I closed the lid, my phone buzzed again. Another message from Ethan. "Nobody cares what you did anymore." I looked at those words for a long time. Then I quietly set the phone face down on the table. 3 weeks later, he would learn exactly how wrong he'd been. I woke before sunrise the next morning. Old habits don't vanish just because the uniform does. By 6:30, I was already on the back porch with black coffee, watching the first light spread over the yard Margaret had loved so much. She used to say the birds always arrived before the worries did. She was right. For a few peaceful minutes, there were no texts, no disappointments, no memories demanding attention. Just birds. Then I remembered the invitation waiting on the kitchen table. Washington, D.C. I still wasn't sure I wanted to go. Recognition had never been something I chased. Most of my career had actually been built around avoiding it. When you spend decades leading soldiers into dangerous places, you learn quickly that headlines rarely tell the truth. The people who deserve recognition are almost never the ones standing in front of the cameras. I'd buried enough good men to know that for certain. After breakfast, I carried the cedar chest into the living room. It felt heavier than I remembered, not because of the medals, but because of everything they represented. Margaret had packed it all with such care. My dress uniform on top, wrapped in tissue paper. Beneath it, old photographs, commendation letters, faded maps, dozens of handwritten notes from soldiers I'd served alongside over the years. I picked up one photograph, a much younger version of me standing with 12 exhausted soldiers somewhere in the Middle East. Every face in it was smiling. Only 5 of us were still alive. I set the photograph back down gently. There are memories you revisit, and memories you simply acknowledge before putting them away again. My eyes landed on a folded American flag, presented to me at my retirement ceremony. Margaret had wanted to display it in the living room. I'd talked her out of it. Our family deserves the attention, I told her. Not my career. She'd smiled that day and said, "That's exactly why you deserve it." I never won that argument. She simply respected my wishes anyway. That afternoon, my neighbor Tom Henderson wandered into the garage carrying an old lawnmower engine. Tom served in Vietnam and walks with a cane now. "You busy, Frank?" "Never am," I told him. "That's retirement talking," he laughed. While I replaced a worn spark plug, he noticed the cedar chest open in the house behind us. "You finally opening that thing?" "I got invited somewhere," I said, and handed him the letter. He adjusted his glasses to read it, and by the time he finished, his expression had completely changed. "I heard rumors about this," he said. "You did?" "They've been trying to track down everyone who ever served under you." I shrugged. "I suppose they found enough." He looked straight at me. "You know why they're doing this?" I didn't ask. "I know," he said, smiling. "That's exactly why they're doing it." I changed the subject. "Let's get your mower running." He understood. Veterans always know when another veteran doesn't want to revisit old wars. 2 days later, my grandson called. Not Ethan. Liam. "Grandpa." "Hey, buddy. Dad says you're going to Washington." "I am." "Is it important?" "It matters to some people." "What are they giving you?" "I honestly don't know." "You won't tell me." I smiled. "I don't actually know." There was a pause. Then he asked something that caught me completely off guard. "Were you scared?" I leaned back in my chair. "Sometimes. Even soldiers get scared." "Every good soldier does." "Really, the brave ones are usually just the people who keep doing the right thing while they're scared." He went quiet again. "My dad says heroes aren't real." I looked out at Margaret's flower garden moving in the breeze. "I think your dad means nobody's perfect." "Is that the same thing?" "No." "So were you a hero?" I answered it exactly the way I'd answered that question for 40 years. "No." "What were you?" "A man who tried to bring as many people home as possible." He didn't speak for several seconds. Finally, softly, he said, "I think that's a hero." Before I could respond, someone in the background called his name. "I gotta go, Grandpa." "Love you." "Love you too." The line went dead. I sat there smiling. Children often understand things adults complicate. Meanwhile, Ethan was preparing for the biggest business opportunity of his career. His cybersecurity company had just signed a sponsorship deal with the National Veterans Honor Foundation. He called Allison from the car. "This ceremony's going to be huge," he told her. "Senators, retired generals, CEOs, everyone." "Sounds exciting." "It'll open doors," he said. "Networking doesn't get much better than this." Allison hesitated. "Did you know your dad's going to be there?" "Yeah, he never said why." "He probably got invited because he's retired military. I'm sure thousands of veterans got invited." "Exactly." He barely gave it another thought. To Ethan, it was just another formal event. Another chance to expand the business. 3 days before the ceremony, another text arrived, this time with a photo, Ethan standing beside a decorated retired general at a corporate reception. "Meeting real military legends," the caption read. I looked at the picture for a long moment, then quietly locked my phone. Margaret would have rolled her eyes at that. She always had a way of finding humor buried in pride. One day, she used to say, "Life introduces us to people who remind us we're smaller than we think." I hoped that day was coming for Ethan. Not because I wanted him embarrassed, because humility usually arrives carrying wisdom. The day before my flight, I drove to the cemetery. Margaret's headstone sat beneath a large maple tree. Fresh flowers were already there, probably from Allison. She visited more often than Ethan ever knew. I sat down in the grass. "They're giving me an award tomorrow," I told her. The wind answered instead. I almost didn't go. Silence. "I wish you were coming." Another breeze moved through the leaves overhead, and I smiled. "You'd probably tell me to iron my uniform." In my mind, I could almost hear her laugh. "And polish your shoes, Frank." I already did. I stayed another 20 minutes, not speaking, just remembering. Before I left, I rested my hand on the stone. I'll be home soon. The flight to Washington was uneventful. Nobody recognized me, exactly how I preferred it. At the airport, I turned down the luxury car the event organizers had offered and took a taxi instead. The driver talked baseball the whole ride and never once asked why I was in town. I never volunteered it. At the hotel, a young receptionist smiled politely. "Welcome, Mr. Donovan. Breakfast starts at 6. Perfect." Nothing about the check-in suggested anything unusual. No cameras, no ceremony. Just another elderly man checking into another hotel. I unpacked slowly, hung my uniform in the closet, and looked out over the Washington skyline. Somewhere across that city, hundreds of veterans were arriving, men and women whose lives had crossed mine decades ago. I wondered how many faces I'd still recognize. How many grandchildren they'd spoil. How many scars they still carried quietly beneath their jackets. My phone buzzed once more. Another message from Ethan. "We'll probably see each other tomorrow. Try not to wander into the VIP section." I smiled sadly. He still believed status was something worn around a neck on a lanyard. Tomorrow, he was going to learn that the deepest respect in any room cannot be bought, inherited, or printed on a name tag. It has to be earned. I barely slept that night. Not from nerves about an award, because I knew I was about to see faces I hadn't seen in decades, faces carrying memories no one else could understand. By 6 the next morning, I was already in the lobby with a coffee. The room buzzed with quiet conversation, mostly older veterans, gray hair, artificial knees, canes, hearing aids. The years had changed all of us. But every so often, two veterans would spot each other across the room, and there'd be a smile, a hug, sometimes tears. No speeches. No dramatic reunions. Just two old soldiers, silently grateful the other had survived long enough to grow old. I understood those moments better than almost anyone in that lobby. By 9:30, shuttle buses began ferrying guests to the National Veterans Honor Center. The ballroom was bigger than I expected, crystal chandeliers, American flags lining every wall, round tables filling the enormous space, a military band quietly rehearsing near the stage. A young volunteer approached me. "Good morning, Colonel Donovan." "Morning. It's an honor to meet you, sir." "The honor belongs to everyone here," I told her. She led me toward the front of the room. "I think you've got the wrong table," I said. "No, sir," she smiled, pointing at the reserved card. "Colonel Frank Donovan. Front row center, facing the stage." I quietly sat down. Nearby veterans nodded respectfully. Some smiled. Others gave me that particular look only soldiers understand, no words necessary. Across the ballroom, Ethan strode confidently through the VIP entrance, his company's logo displayed on one of the sponsor banners near the stage. He looked exactly like the executive he'd worked so hard to become, tailored navy suit, expensive watch, perfect posture. Allison walked beside him. Liam stayed close in his first blazer and tie. "This place is incredible," Liam whispered. "It should be," Ethan answered. "Our company helped pay for it." As they entered, Ethan spotted me immediately. "There he is." Allison suggested they say hello. Instead, Ethan spent the next 20 minutes greeting business clients, senators, executives, shaking hands, trading business cards, laughing at jokes, introducing himself over and over. Networking. Always networking. Eventually, he made his way to my table. "Dad." "Morning. You found your seat." "I did." He glanced at the reserved sign. "I guess they gave veterans priority seating," he said, and didn't think much more about it. Why would he? To him it was just another seat assignment. Liam stepped closer. "Grandpa." "Hey, buddy. You look nice." "So do you." He lowered his voice. "I'm glad you came." "So am I." Before Ethan could say anything else, an elderly Marine wearing a chest full of ribbons approached our table, studying me carefully for a few seconds before breaking into a grin. "I'll be damned," he said. I stood. "Charlie." He laughed. "You old mule." We embraced. Charlie Morgan had been one of my company commanders almost 30 years earlier. Time had bent his back, but not his spirit. "I thought you'd never leave Ohio," he said. "I almost didn't." He turned to Ethan. "Your father's still as stubborn as ever." Ethan forced a smile. "You know my dad?" Charlie stared at him. "Knew him?" "Son, half the people in this building know your father." Before Ethan could ask another question, another veteran approached. Then another. Within minutes, 6 or 7 old soldiers had gathered around our table, every conversation sounding the same. "Colonel, good seeing you, sir. It's been too long. I've wanted to thank you." Ethan grew visibly more confused. Allison noticed too, leaning in to whisper, "I don't think these are random acquaintances." Neither did I. The ceremony began at 10. The military band played the national anthem. Everyone stood. After opening remarks, awards went out to veterans across several generations, each story worthy of its own applause. Then the master of ceremonies stepped back to the podium, his voice suddenly more serious. "Ladies and gentlemen." A pause. "Our next recognition is unlike any we've ever presented." The ballroom quieted completely. For more than 40 years, another pause. One man consistently declined every public honor ever offered to him. I lowered my eyes. I already knew exactly where this was going. He refused interviews. He declined books. He turned down speaking tours. He insisted any recognition belonged to the soldiers beside him. A photograph appeared on the projection screen, a much younger version of me, standing among dozens of exhausted soldiers. Ethan looked up, his eyebrows narrowing. "What?" The announcer continued. "Many of the men and women whose lives he changed asked us to make one final attempt." Another pause. This time, they asked us not to take no for an answer. Soft laughter rippled through the room. "Colonel Franklin James Donovan." I slowly stood. And then something happened that no amount of preparation could have readied me for. The announcer scanned the crowd. "If you ever served under Colonel Donovan, please rise." One chair moved. Then another. Then another. Within seconds, more than 300 veterans were standing. Army, Marines, Air Force, Navy, National Guard. Men and women, some leaning on canes, some wearing prosthetic legs, some quietly wiping away tears. Not one remained seated. The ballroom went completely silent. No applause. No cheering. Just silence. Then, as if sharing one heartbeat, every one of them raised a salute. 300 salutes, perfectly still, perfectly silent. My throat tightened. I recognized so many faces: sergeants, lieutenants, medics, pilots, mechanics. People I'd laughed with. People I'd mourned with. People I'd promised to bring home. Across the room, Ethan slowly rose without even realizing he'd done it, eyes darting from veteran to veteran. "What is happening?" Allison couldn't answer. Neither could Liam. The silence stretched almost 20 seconds. It felt like a lifetime. Then another figure stepped onto the stage. Retired General David Mercer, for stars, one of the most respected military leaders in the country. He walked down past senators, past cameras, past every VIP in the room, straight toward me. He didn't extend a hand. He came to attention and saluted. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, looking directly into my eyes, "this man once saved my life." The room stayed silent. I was a young captain. I made a terrible mistake. I should have lost my career. He paused. Colonel Donovan accepted responsibility that wasn't his, because he believed leaders protect the people beneath them. I quietly shook my head. "You earned your career." "No, sir," he said, smiling. "You gave it back to me." He lowered his salute and embraced me without a trace of embarrassment. Around us I could hear people quietly crying, veterans who had survived entire wars together, undone by this one moment. I looked toward the audience, toward Ethan. His face had gone completely white. The confidence he'd worn all morning had vanished. The suit, the title, the sponsor badge, none of it mattered anymore. Slowly, almost fearfully, he walked toward me. When he finally reached me, his voice barely worked. "Dad." His eyes filled. "Who are you?" I looked at my son for a long moment, then gently placed a hand on his shoulder. "I'm still the same man who taught you how to ride a bicycle." He stared at me speechless. But I smiled sadly. "I think it's finally time you heard the rest of my story." The ballroom stayed silent, not the uncomfortable kind, but the kind that settles over a room when people realize they're witnessing something bigger than an award ceremony. General Mercer stepped back to give us space. 300 veterans slowly lowered their salutes, some wiping away tears, some smiling through memories only they understood. Ethan still stood in front of me, every trace of confidence gone. "Dad," he said again. "Who are you?" For a long moment I didn't answer, not because I wanted to keep him guessing, but because there wasn't a simple answer to give. Finally I said, "I'm your father." He shook his head. "No." His voice cracked. "I mean all of this," he said, gesturing at the room. "The generals. The soldiers. The way everyone looks at you. I don't understand." I rested a hand on his shoulder. "I know." The ceremony broke for a scheduled intermission, and reporters rushed toward us immediately, microphones and cameras all at once. "Colonel Donovan, could we get a few words?" "Sir, what does this award mean to you?" I smiled politely. "It belongs to the people standing behind me." "But you've avoided interviews for decades." "That hasn't changed." General Mercer laughed softly beside me. "Still impossible to interview." 40 years of practice, I told him. He patted my shoulder. "Never change." "I don't plan to." The reporters eventually drifted toward other guests. I could almost hear Margaret's voice. "Good job, Frank." She never liked cameras either. Ethan followed me into a quiet hallway overlooking the Potomac. For the first time in years, it was just the two of us. No business partners, no audience. He leaned against the window. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything." "But I do," he said, taking a slow breath. "I've been ashamed of you." Those words hurt, not because they were new, but because he had finally said them out loud. "I thought you settled for an ordinary life." "I did settle," I told him. He frowned. "What do you mean?" "I settled for peace." He looked confused. "I had opportunities after retirement. Defense contractors, consulting, politics, television. I turned them all down." "Why?" "Your mother," I said. He leaned back. "Mom." She asked me a question once. "When you're 80 years old, what's going to matter more, another promotion, or sitting on the porch together?" I looked out at the river. I chose the porch. A tear rolled down Ethan's cheek. "I never knew." "I know. You and your mother never told me, because we didn't think you needed to carry my past." "I wish I had," he said. No, I told him, shaking my head. I wish you'd asked. A waitress, no, this came later, at the diner, but in that hallway, more veterans found us, one after another, over the next hour. A former medic. You stayed with me after I lost my leg. A helicopter pilot. You wrote to my wife every week while I recovered. A sergeant. You paid for my mother's funeral. I frowned. I don't remember that. I do, he said gently. Another veteran laughed. You made us repaint the barracks 3 times. Everyone nearby laughed along. Details save lives, I said. They do. Somewhere in the middle of it, a middle-aged man in a dark blue suit stepped up quietly. Colonel. I didn't recognize him at first. Then he smiled. You probably don't remember me. I remember every face. He laughed. I was Private Danny Ruiz. Suddenly I did remember, the youngest mechanic in our battalion, barely 19, always smiling. Danny. He hugged me tightly. It's been 32 years, he said. I've wanted to thank you. You already did. No, I never really did. Ethan watched quietly. Danny turned to him. You must be his son. I am. Danny smiled. Your father changed my life. Ethan looked almost embarrassed. How? I grew up in East LA, Danny said. My dad was in prison. My mom worked 3 jobs. I joined the army because I didn't think I had another future. He looked at me. I made a lot of mistakes. You were 19. I almost got kicked out. Instead of giving up on me, he said, your father spent every Saturday teaching me. Teaching you what? Everything. Leadership, discipline, responsibility. He even helped me study after lights out. I own 3 auto repair shops now, he said. My oldest daughter just graduated from medical school. He looked back at Ethan. None of that happens if your father decides I wasn't worth saving. By late afternoon, Ethan had stopped asking questions. He just listened. For the first time in his adult life, he wasn't trying to impress anyone. He wasn't networking. He wasn't checking his phone. He was watching, learning, trying finally to understand the man he'd spent years overlooking. Eventually, he turned to me. I always thought greatness meant becoming the most successful person in the room. I smiled gently. A lot of people believe that. I was one of them, he said. You don't have to stay one. He nodded slowly. I don't think I ever knew what respect actually looked like. I glanced toward the ballroom, where 300 veterans were laughing together, some on canes, some missing limbs, some carrying scars no one else could see. They're not honoring me because of my rank, I told him. Then why? Because every one of them knows I'd do it all again for them. He stared out at the room a long moment. I've spent years chasing admiration. There's nothing wrong with succeeding. I know, he said. But admiration disappears the moment the money does. It often does, I agreed. What lasts? I looked at him. The people whose lives got better because you were in them. His eyes filled with tears, and for the first time since he was a little boy, I saw humility in his face instead of pride. Somehow that felt more meaningful than the medal waiting to be placed around my neck. By the time the ceremony ended, the ballroom felt different. Not because the decorations had changed, because Ethan had. That morning he'd walked through those doors believing success was measured in titles, income, and influence. Now he stood quietly beside me, watching veterans embrace each other like brothers and sisters, simply picking up where life had left off. Nobody cared whose car was nicest. Nobody asked about portfolios. The conversations were about grandchildren, lost friends, second chances, cancer battles, fishing trips, the simple miracle of growing old. General Mercer found us again. Frank, I hope you'll reconsider. I already know what you're about to ask, I told him. He laughed. Still reading minds. You want me to give speeches? A few. No. Mentor young officers? They already have better teachers than I ever was. He shook his head. They don't. He turned to Ethan. Your father has spent 40 years saying no to attention. I can see that now, Ethan said quietly. Do you know what he did after retiring? Ethan shook his head. He visited wounded veterans, General Mercer said. Every month. Sometimes he'd drive 6 hours just to spend 20 minutes with someone who thought the world had forgotten them. I looked at him. You promised. I promised I wouldn't tell stories you hadn't already lived, he said, smiling. I think today changes that. Ethan looked at me. You never told us. I wasn't doing it for recognition. How long? 26 years. His eyes widened. 26 years, I said. When someone has no family left, a familiar face matters. No one spoke for a moment. Then General Mercer excused himself to greet another group of veterans. Ethan just stared at me. I don't think I know who you are anymore. I smiled gently. You do. I'm still learning. So am I. That evening, after the ceremony wrapped up, I skipped the formal reception and walked a few blocks to a small family-owned diner I remembered from years back. The waitress, about 50, had coffee poured before I even asked. Long day? The best kind, I told her. You here for the veterans event? I am. My dad served in Vietnam. He must be proud of you. I told her I would have liked meeting him too. Simple conversations always meant more to me than banquet speeches ever did. About 15 minutes later, the bell above the door rang. I looked up. Ethan walked in alone, spotted me in the corner booth. Mind if I join you? Of course. He slid in across from me. Neither of us spoke for a minute. The waitress appeared. Coffee? He nodded. Please. She walked off, and finally Ethan looked at me. I owe you an apology. You don't owe me anything. I do, he said, taking a slow breath. I've been ashamed of you. I thought you settled for an ordinary life. I did settle, I told him. He frowned. What do you mean? I settled for peace. He looked confused. I had opportunities after retirement, defense contractors, consulting, politics, television. I turned them all down. Why? I smiled. Your mother. He leaned back. Mom. She asked me once, when you're 80 years old, what's going to matter more, another promotion or sitting on the porch together? I looked out the window. I chose the porch. A tear slid down his cheek. I never knew. I know. You and your mother never told me. We didn't think you needed to carry my past. I wish I had. No, I said. I wish you'd asked. The waitress set 2 slices of apple pie on the table. We didn't order these, I said. She smiled. The gentleman who just left paid for them and pointed out the window where an elderly veteran climbed into an old pickup truck, waving once before driving off. I laughed. See? I can't even buy my own pie. For the first time that whole day, Ethan laughed too. It wasn't forced. It sounded like the laugh I remembered from when he was 15. I realized just how long it had been since I'd heard it. Back in Ohio, life slowly tried to return to normal. The local paper ran my photo on the front page, local veteran receives national honor, and by lunchtime, reporters were parked outside my house. I politely declined every interview. One young reporter looked disappointed. People deserve to know your story. The people who need to know already do, I told her. By evening, the driveway was quiet again, exactly how I liked it. 3 days later, there was a knock at my door. Ethan stood there holding a cardboard box. I found these, he said. What are they? Mom's things. He carried the box inside. I've been cleaning the attic, and we sat together at the kitchen table. Inside were photo albums, old Christmas ornaments, letters, greeting cards. Then Ethan carefully unfolded a yellowed envelope. She wrote this 2 weeks before she died, he said. My chest tightened. I've never seen it. Neither had I. He handed it over. Margaret's handwriting hadn't changed, beautiful study. Frank, if you're reading this someday, it means I'm no longer sitting across the table telling you to slow down when you drink your coffee. I hope Ethan grows into the man I know he can become. If he ever loses his way, Don't remind him of your medals. Remind him of your kindness. That's what made me fall in love with you. Love always, Margaret. I couldn't finish reading it out loud. My vision blurred. Ethan gently took the letter back. I spent years believing your greatest accomplishment happened in the army, he said. He shook his head. I was wrong. What do you mean? You built a family, he said. You stayed with Mom through every round of chemo. You never complained. You never made yourself the hero. He smiled sadly. I never noticed. You were busy building your own life, I told him. That's not an excuse, he said. No, it isn't. He stood and walked toward the living room, to the one framed family photo on the fireplace mantel, Margaret in the middle, Ethan on one side, me on the other, Liam sitting on my shoulders. I've been chasing admiration from strangers, he said, while ignoring the man who earned my respect years ago. I stood slowly. You don't need to spend the rest of your life making up for that. I know, he said. But I do need to become someone my son can admire for the right reasons. Now you're asking the right question, I told him. He stepped closer, and for the first time in over 20 years, my son hugged me. Not the quick, polite embrace people trade at holidays. A real one. The kind that says everything words can't. I'm sorry, Dad, he said. I closed my eyes. So am I. For what? I should have found a better way to tell you who I was. He pulled back and shook his head. No. You spent your whole life showing me. I just wasn't paying attention. In that moment, I understood something. The greatest victory of my life wasn't standing in a ballroom while 300 veterans saluted me. It was standing in my own living room, finally seeing my son come home. Spring arrived quietly that year. The maple tree in the front yard grew new leaves, and Margaret's flower bed slowly came back to life. I spent my mornings doing exactly what I'd always done, watering the garden, drinking coffee on the porch, waving at neighbors walking their dogs. The national ceremony faded fast from the headlines. Television stations moved on. Newspapers found newer stories. That suited me fine. Real life had finally returned, and for the first time in a long while, my family was part of it. One Saturday morning, another knock at the door. Liam stood there in a backward baseball cap, holding a fishing pole. Behind him, Ethan leaned against the truck with a small smile. Grandpa, Liam said, you still remember how to fish? I certainly hope so, I laughed. He glanced over his shoulder. Dad said we could spend the whole day together. I looked at Ethan. You sure? He nodded. If you'll have us. I've always had room for you. An hour later, the three of us sat beside Buck Creek, our lines disappearing into calm water. For a while nobody spoke, not because we had nothing to say, but because peaceful silence doesn't need filling. Finally, Liam broke it. Grandpa. Yeah. What was the hardest part about being a soldier? I looked out over the water. Coming home. He frowned. I thought coming home would be the best part. So did I. What made it hard? People expect you to become the person you were before, I told him. Weren't you? No. None of us were. He nodded thoughtfully. Then he surprised me. Dad says heroes don't always wear medals. I looked at Ethan. He smiled. I've been learning. Liam grinned. I think heroes teach people how to become better. I reached over and ruffled his hair. I think your grandmother would agree with you. A few weeks later, Ethan called. Our town's holding a Memorial Day ceremony, he said. The mayor wants to recognize you. I sighed. Ethan. I already told him you'd probably say no. I appreciate that, but he hesitated. Liam asked if you'd come anyway. For him. I smiled. Then I'll be there. The ceremony was nothing like Washington. No cameras, no politicians, no military band flown in from the Pentagon. Just folding chairs in the town square, a high school choir, the local American Legion, kids waving little flags. It felt honest. It felt like home. I sat quietly in the second row, exactly where I wanted to be, but the mayor apparently had other plans. Near the end, he stepped to the microphone. "Today, we'd like to recognize one of our own." I lowered my head. "Oh no." The crowd laughed softly. "Frank Donovan has spent decades serving not only our country, but this community." I looked around. There were neighbors whose fences I'd fixed, widows whose driveways I'd shoveled after every storm, teenagers I'd taught to change a flat tire, people I never once thought of as extraordinary. The mayor smiled. "Frank once told me service doesn't end when the uniform comes off." I've never forgotten that. He invited me up. I walked forward reluctantly into warm, gentle applause, nothing like Washington. Somehow it meant even more. When the applause settled, he handed me the microphone. I hadn't prepared anything. I never do. I looked out at the crowd, found Liam sitting beside Ethan in the front row, both of them smiling, and took a slow breath. "I've received more recognition this year than I ever expected," I said, and a few people laughed. "But I'd like to tell you a secret." The crowd quieted. "The medals in my closet aren't the greatest achievement of my life." I looked toward my son. "My greatest achievement is getting another chance to know my family." Ethan lowered his head, not in shame, in gratitude. I kept going. "When we're young, we spend our lives trying to prove ourselves. We chase promotions, bigger houses, nicer cars, important titles. There's nothing wrong with working hard. But one day you realize people won't remember what you owned. They'll remember how you treated them. Whether you kept your promises. Whether you showed up when someone needed you. Whether you chose kindness when nobody was watching. If I've learned anything, it's that respect cannot be demanded. It can only be earned." The applause that followed lasted far longer this time, not because of me, but because everyone there understood exactly what was underneath those words. Summer settled in. Every Tuesday evening, Ethan came for dinner. Sometimes Allison joined. Sometimes she worked late. Liam almost always came, insisting on helping me grill, though he wasn't very good at it yet. One evening after dinner, he disappeared into the living room and came back holding a folded piece of paper. "Grandpa, what's that?" "My school speech." "You want me to read it to you?" "I want to read it to you." I leaned back. "I'm listening." He unfolded it with nervous hands. "Our teacher asked us to talk about our hero," he said. "Most kids picked athletes. A few picked presidents. My friend picked Batman." Everyone laughed. "I picked my grandfather," he said. He cleared his throat. "My grandpa taught me that the strongest people aren't the loudest. They're the ones who quietly help others. He says bringing people home is more important than winning." I think that's true in families too. He folded the paper back up. "I'm proud to have his last name." Nobody spoke. Allison wiped away tears. Even Ethan couldn't hide his. I looked toward the empty chair where Margaret always used to sit, and for just a second, I imagined her smiling. "You were right," I whispered to her silently. Family was always the mission. That night, after everyone left, I stepped onto the back porch. The stars stretched across the Ohio sky, the same sky I'd once looked up at from deserts, mountains, forests, and oceans decades ago. My phone buzzed. A message from Ethan, not from across town this time, from his driveway. "Love you, Dad." I smiled and replied with 2 words I'd waited far too long to send back. "Love you too." Sometimes revenge isn't about humiliating the people who underestimated you. Sometimes the greatest victory is simply letting the truth replace misunderstanding. And sometimes forgiveness accomplishes what pride never could.